Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I hope you can all hear me okay. Can you hear me, Sarah? Yeah, good. We're very much looking forward to today's webinar. My name's Kyra, and I'm going to start with some introductions in about 2 minutes' time. I'm just waiting for a few more people to join before we get started. While we wait, we're going to launch a quick poll just to find out why you're here, what kind of areas of HR you're all looking to streamline, what you want to benefit from today. Some of the areas we're going to cover, this is a bit of a hint in this poll here. So we're going to be looking at onboarding, recruitment, employer brand policies, and many more areas. So I can see some answers coming through now already. Oh, it keeps changing. The most popular answers keep changing all the time. Onboarding and engagement seem to be topping the ranks at the moment. I hope we've got some useful tips for you. %40 of you have named onboarding now. All of the above. Hi, Amy, thanks for your answer. We just need help everywhere. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and end the poll now. I think the winner, I mean, my personal favourite answer is Amy's answer, all of the above, but I think the winner here is onboarding being the most popular area that people would like some help with today.
Perfect.
Okay. So, yeah, interesting one. I think we've got some good tips though, Sarah. I think onboarding's you, isn't it?
We do. We have some good tips on onboarding, so we'll talk through that and spend a little bit more time on it as well.
Perfect. So if you're just logging in now, welcome to the webinar series. Today we're going to be talking about how to streamline your HR processes. My name is Kyra. I'm here today with my colleague Sarah. I think many of you will know either one or both of us already. We're part of the customer success team here at HR Partner. Just before we get started, when participating in today's webinar, you will be muted for the entirety of the session, but feel free to use the chat feature to ask any questions, and we'll get to those questions towards the end of the webinar for you. Okay, shall we get started?
Yes, let's go ahead and get started.
So for anybody who isn't aware already, we are with the company HR Partner. HR Partner is a platform, it's an HRIS solution that combines simplicity and ease of use with accessibility. So it gives small organizations access to the tools that big organizations use without that huge price tag. Today we have over 1,500 customers in 75 countries worldwide. We're a very small and agile team, and we really do strive to get to know our customers so that we can provide the best tailored support around the clock. Okay. So my name is Kyra, for anybody who doesn't know me. I'm based in the UK. I have a bachelor's degree in international business studies in German and an MA in German and a certificate in recruitment practice. So I've got about 10 years of experience in recruitment, both agency side and as part of an internal HR function, during which time I've managed teams, managed projects, and I've mentioned in the past being part of some huge software implementation projects. And I think that's where I kind of found my love for all things software and decided I wanted to jump headfirst into a brand new career around 18 months ago. So I've been with HR Partner now within the customer success function for 18 months, and I very much enjoy getting to know our customers and helping them streamline their HR in the best practice, really, in line with our platform. Over to you, Sarah.
My name is Sarah Brandenburg, and I also work as a part of the customer success team here at HR Partner. Of course, work closely with Kyra and many of our clients as well. My background is in human resources, where I've managed employees, the policies and procedures behind the organization, recruitment, and then all other aspects of human resources and HR for small to medium-sized businesses as well. I hold an active professional in human resources, a PHR certification from HRCI, and I have loved working with the clients to both consult on how HR Partner can better support their organizations and just better understand our clients and what they're using for productivity to streamline their own processes. So this webinar was really born out of Kyra and our desire to help you, to help our clients, to help those who are looking to make things just a little bit more efficient and easier, especially towards the end of the year. So I'm excited to jump in and talk with you about some of our favorite hacks in HR.
Absolutely.
So before we officially jump into our content today, I want to remind you that our team is always available if you have questions about areas of HR Partner that are not covered in today's webinar. Of course, today we're focusing more on the general side of HR productivity hacks and less on the system itself. But if you have more questions, or if you have questions specifically related to the system that don't get answered today, please reach out to support at HR Partner. Or take a look at our knowledge base of help articles. We are always expanding and adding to that knowledge base. And if you have questions about our system or if you need extra support, we'd love to chat with you. So that's support@hrpartner.io. I'm sure many of you already know that email address, and we'd be happy to help.
Perfect. Okay, so what are we going to be covering in today's session? Now, we've already hinted at some of this with the poll before we got started. So we're going to be looking at the day-to-day of HR, recruitment, onboarding, employer brand, policies, learning and development, people and benefits management, and employee engagement. So each of those things that we addressed in that poll earlier. Now, there is just a few hints, tips, and hacks within each of those areas. They're real-life ideas and tricks that we've used in the past, largely, aren't they, Sarah? Just to make life a little bit easier. I hope you enjoy them. I hope you all get something from it.
Let's get started with the day-to-day human resources, all of the little things that encompass HR. So we're going to talk about some really tangible and small things that you can do to help your day move along, to help your productivity move along. Some of them are small, some of them may be new to you, maybe well used, but these are some of our favorites. The first one is to set a timer for yourself. So I have a picture here of a block timer that I use almost daily. It's on my desk as we speak. And it's setting a timer for those specific items. If you sit down and you say, okay, I'm going to focus on email for 15 minutes, set a timer for yourself and hold yourself accountable to that time that you spent so that you can focus on specific areas without interruption. It's very easy to see an email pop up when you're trying to work on a project and to jump over and quickly answer that email or to get involved in a longer email. So set a timer for yourself and hold yourself accountable to that timer. The next one is batching like items. So this one is really something that I love to do. So if I sit down and I say, well, I have a few meetings, but then I'm going to focus on area within benefits management. You focus on benefits management and all of the tasks that are related to that at the same time. So say I'm onboarding a new starter and I'm going through the onboarding process. Maybe for that time that you spent, maybe for that 1 hour, you batch other items and you spend onboarding on other new starters, or maybe you focus a little bit on your processes and process improvement for onboarding during that time. So you batch those like items or related tasks to get all of those things done at the same time. This really helps your headspace mentally so that you're focused on that project at hand without being distracted from other areas. The next one is the 2-minute rule, a personal favorite of mine. So this was coined by David Allen in a book called Getting Things Done. And the 2-minute rule talks about if an action is going to take less than 2 minutes, it should be done at that moment. So if you have an action come in, and that could be an email, maybe it's just a simple task, maybe it's a request or a message or a text message. If you think that it will take less than 2 minutes, less than the timer that you've set for yourself has, do it right then and get it off your checklist. Don't even put it on your to-do list because you can get it done in that 2 minutes or less time. So I love that book, Getting Things Done. It was simple. It was a short read, but I've always stuck to the 2-minute rule. I think that's a very helpful thing. A few others, you can use naming conventions on your files. You can schedule emails to be sent. So many email clients today have the delay delivery or schedule send feature. So it can be done in Outlook. I know it can be done in Google as well. And many other email clients have this feature where when you're batching like items, maybe you don't want to send the email right away. But if you are sending onboarding tasks to new starters, and maybe one does not need to go out today, but tomorrow instead, you can schedule that email to be sent tomorrow. This is especially helpful for teams who work across time zones. So when you have multiple time zones that you're working in and you have clients who are working outside of maybe your normal working hours, scheduling an email to be sent outside of those times so that it arrives in the top of their inbox can be very helpful and very efficient as well. One of the last things, and this is maybe a little bit counterintuitive, but roll with me. So minimize your tech stack and look at the tech stack. I know it sounds surprising, but in today's world, we're always encouraged to focus on the latest and greatest and add more technology, more apps that will help you, to-do list apps, checklist apps, project apps. But I would encourage you to take a look at the tech stack that you already have and see how you can use that. So if you are using Slack, what else can you use Slack for? If you're using your email quite a bit, can you instead use a beta feature in email to not only schedule send, but maybe flag the emails and filter them for things like to-do lists or batching, or maybe you have foldering content. Dropbox and Google Drive are great places to store files. So maybe you can also use that existing software to store other types of data and files that you need. And then don't forget about your calendar as well. So when you're talking about your tech stack, your calendar is a very underutilized tool. And it's not just for meetings and invited meetings. Maybe you block off time to batch like items and to focus on projects all at the same time. So you can use your calendar for those reminders. You can use your calendar to schedule out tasks in advance. And that is a great way to be able to kind of plan out your week. So at the beginning of the week, you have all of these things that maybe are on your mind, but maybe you use some of your existing software and tools to be able to help you be a little bit more efficient. And so these are some of my favorite day-to-day activities, tasks, and hacks that I use to be just a little bit more efficient with my time.
Thanks for that, Sarah. I've just made a note about the 2-minute rule. I think I'm going to have to try and adopt the 2-minute rule myself. Absolutely. Okay, so moving on to recruitment. In today's candidate-driven market, more and more companies are striving towards a hire in a day recruitment style. So trying to get things done as concisely as possible. So for volume hires, potentially have an assessment centre in the morning, followed by a one-to-one in the afternoon. For more specialist hires, potentially try out panel interviews. Anything you can do to make your process as smooth and as short as possible. You want to impress the candidates with your efficiency while also avoiding the possibility of them being poached by a competitor while you're too busy arranging that next stage. When it comes to preparing the interviews, you should always have a question bank to help ensure that your interviews are compliant, consistent, and that they instill your brand and highlight your core values to the applicant. If you could put the time into preparing a bank of maybe 20 questions and select the most relevant 5 for each new vacancy, you'll be saving time in the long run, whilst also helping members of the selection panel who may not have interviewed too frequently in the past. To get the most out of your applications and your applicants, keep those questions open. Try to help that natural flow of conversation rather than a stop-start question-answer style of interview. We do actually have a webinar on interviewing that Sarah did, I think was it last year or the year before, so we're going to share the link to that webinar after this. Then think about speeding things up either side of interviews with the use of templates. So the rule of thumb would be, if you've sent the same email 5 times, set up a template for it. Templates can be saved in many email clients and CRM systems, and of course HRIS systems, such as HR Partner. So if you're using an email client that doesn't have that feature, you could always save a template in your draft emails so that you can just copy and paste it into the body of a new email when the time is right. And that's a way that I've worked myself in the past. Another thing that you'll notice is I'm referring here specifically to email templates. So sending emails over post is going to help with streamlining insofar as you're alleviating the need to scan in everything that needs to be kept in an employee record or on file. And you're almost likely you're going to get a much quicker response, aren't you, if you do things via email rather than in the post. And most places accept e-signature documents these days as legally binding. So where possible, try to do things via email. So I'm going to move on with that same theme and talk about some key recruitment email templates that will be really useful for you. So first and foremost, a thank you for your application email. It's always appreciated. And often without this, you're likely to get an influx of candidates asking for confirmation that you've received their application. If you have an inbox dedicated to receiving applicants, you could have some sort of autoresponder on there, just like those used for out of office notifications that simply thank somebody for their email. If you do have a system like HR Partner in place, automatic responses can often be built into your workflow so that a thank you for your application email is automatically triggered upon receipt of that application. The second suggested email template that you're likely to need will be a fairly generic "congratulations, you're through to the next round" response that can be tailored for each role or each candidate where necessary. Then another one that we would recommend that you had ready would be a checking in with applications type of email. So checking in with applicants is something that we should all be doing regularly. It helps keep them engaged and help ensure that our talent pool is kept warm. So have that template. Make it one that could be tweaked slightly to make it applicable to those currently in process if that's taking a little bit longer for some reason, and also those who may be more passive candidates, people you've engaged with in the past and identified as talent that you'd like to keep in touch with for when the time is right. Hopefully, anybody recruiting will need an offer letter template. As mentioned earlier, more and more companies are sending offers via email. Rather than attaching a Word document, just do it in the body of the email itself. That's becoming more and more frequently done these days. Just keep it simple and have areas where you can then populate things such as name, salary, role, and start date. The next one, rejections. It's something that nobody likes to do, but it has to be done. People want to know where they stand. They don't want to be strung along or worse still, ignored. Where possible, candidates should really be verbally rejected, especially those further into the hiring process. But we know that this isn't always feasible, especially in the case of volume recruitment. If you're likely to be working this way, create a template for it. For those being rejected immediately after application, this could potentially be a little more generic, but for those further into the process, make it easy to tailor so that you can give them some feedback that they can truly learn from. We've actually written a selection of recruitment email templates, and those are available on our blog. And again, we're going to be sending today's participants a link to those so that you've got something to work from.
So we talk a little bit about email templates a couple of times in today's webinar, but what I love about what Kyra said is that the purpose is to keep up with the candidate. The purpose is to keep up with them so that they're not poached by other talent. And in today's world, it's all about top talent and how we can retain that, how we can attract it. And so it's such a good idea to create these email templates, not only to keep your process in line and to make your job easier, but so that you're keeping up with them, you're keeping them engaged. So when we talk about other areas, we'll talk about onboarding next, but I love what she said about that because it's so important. Other companies are doing it, your competitors are doing it. And so any way that you can keep up with them and use those email templates for recruitment is helpful. Let's jump into onboarding, everybody's most excited point of today. So there's a couple of pieces of onboarding that I want to discuss because onboarding can focus or can happen in different ways for different organizations. Every single organization that we work with, that I've worked with in my past and here at HR Partner has a different onboarding process, has a different onboarding step or procedure. And sometimes we're talking about before hire, and sometimes we're talking about after that hire date and that commencement date. So the first thing that I'd want you to do is to create a checklist. So I say checklist and it's sort of all encompassing. So that's that next bullet point there. But when you're thinking about a checklist, the first thing that I want you to do is sort of on a piece of paper, maybe with your other team members, have an outline or a checklist of every single process and thing that you want to do from that recruitment process to that hire process. And then on the next page, it's from that hire date to when onboarding is considered complete. And that part, when onboarding is considered complete, can be at the 30-day mark, perhaps it's at the 90-day mark, perhaps it's after 1 week. That is where it will be different for every organization. So take that legal pad or that piece of paper with your team and just sort of brain dump all of your checklist items. What needs to be done, what needs to be created, what steps needs to be taken, who are the action items assigned to. That starts your process. And then you can take that checklist and you can refine it. And that checklist will really make sure that nothing is lost. Nothing is left undone from the time the recruited candidate becomes your applicant, becomes your new starter and your new hire, and they start with your organization. The goal here with a smooth onboarding process is to make sure that they stay engaged, they stay excited about the position and the role, and that they're already starting off as an engaged employee, which we'll talk about in a few slides as well, employee engagement. So start with that brain dump, get everything out on paper, and then find out what the actual checklist items and steps are that you can put into a checklist. And of course, we have an excellent checklist feature within HR Partner that we absolutely love. And it can be done for things like checklists or for new hires, for new starters. You can have ones for full-time and part-time, but you can also use checklists for any sort of task items that you have that are assigned to staff and employees on a regular basis. So definitely take a look at some of the content that we've already created around checklists, both in our knowledge base of articles and then some of the blog posts that we've written about them, because those can be helpful within HR Partner. But outside of HR Partner, it can be a paper checklist that you start. You're outlining all of the steps, when they happen, who is meant to complete them, and who is responsible for managing those tasks. So the employee or the potential employee may be responsible for submitting their onboarding paperwork and uploading a copy of their visa, their certificate, their licenses, but who is taking those documents and filing them in their employee profile, in their employee record. So who's responsible for managing those documents after the fact? That just ensures that nothing is forgotten. And I find that's a really great first step. At one of my first roles within HR Partner or within human resources in general, I was a junior level employee. And so one of my tasks was onboarding. And one thing we had were file folders for each new starter. And on the file folder, we printed on labels, checklists. So the checklist label was affixed to the file folder itself. And we were able to check off on those items and keep them. Now, that was years ago. I'm dating myself just a little bit, because the next area that I'd like to focus on is how you can keep things paperless versus having all of those file folders and all of those pieces. Now, there's some things that need to be paper, in person, hard copies, but wherever possible, keep things paperless. And this is where some of those first hacks that we talked about will come into play. Where can you create an email template for onboarding? Where can you schedule out an email to be sent or block things off on your calendar so you can focus on those onboarding tasks? I love sending email templates out to onboarding for that onboarding process for those new hires, because remember, the new hire, the new starter does not know that they're getting a stock email template, but instead they feel like they're looked after, they're checked in on, and they're already engaged from the start. So email templates are still an excellent part. I know it's a little bit of an administrative burden to have to take the time to create some of those email templates, but once they're there and they're used, you can use them again and again, and it makes your life just a little bit easier. And I know even Outlook has some email template features. So does Google in the beta version, so you can create some of those templates. And of course, HR Partner has a fantastic feature for implementing email templates in onboarding and recruitment and a couple of other areas of the system as well. When we talk about keeping things paperless, we already did a webinar on that. So I will link that and we'll send that over to you along with some of the other links that we'll send over to you. But we talked a little bit about how to go paperless, where we can go paperless and a little bit more. That means that those documents, those processes, that information about your new starters would be accessible to anyone at any time. Nothing can go missing. And then it tells the employee about your brand, about your efficiency. And then it also helps you streamline and modernize those processes just a little bit. So those are some of our favorite pieces. related to onboarding.
Lovely. Everybody likes a to-do list. It's essentially a huge to-do list, isn't it? I like a to-do list. Absolutely. Okay, so I'm going to now move on to employer brand. So employer brand is essentially the way in which you differentiate yourself from other employers. You need to ensure you've done your competitor analysis, that you know exactly what makes you stand out from the crowd as an employer. Why should people want to come and work for you? Employer brand is all about how you attract, recruit, and retain your talent. It encompasses everything from your salaries and benefits right through to your company culture. So how do we showcase our employer brand? A massive part of this is identifying core values that are key to your organization. What are the beliefs and principles that underpin your organization? The common thread among your people. The next thing I would say once you've done this is identifying your brand ambassadors, key people who can help you spread the word. Happy employees are your biggest advocate, and those are the people that you really want to be shouting the loudest. Then finally, be consistent. Ask yourself, are we living and breathing our values and overall employer brand at every point? Make sure they're ingrained into your interview questions. Shout about them in the office. I had one company that I've worked for in the past that had them even on the wallpaper in the offices. Make sure they're well known in the organisation, that everybody knows and everybody feels your values as well. Okay, I'm going to move on to policies and procedures, Sarah.
So a couple of things to move on from policies, procedures, document management. There's really two parts to the conversation that we'll focus here today, because this tends to be a little bit more of the paper trail, some of the less glamorous parts of human resources. So the first piece that we want to encourage you to use is to find a place to house a central company library, a centralized location where all areas, and if you could click on the slide next to open those bullet points for me, that would be wonderful. The centralized company library, these are just a place where you can find all of the documents that you need, and also figuring out how you can share those information and those pieces with your staff as well. So what I find is that oftentimes we have things stored on our local desktop on a shared document site, maybe online, maybe an email and email folders. So if you can create a simple process where that every time you have a document that comes in that you want to save or update, you save that and share it with your central company library. And then within that, you maybe have folders that are only meant for yourself, maybe folders that are meant for your team, and maybe folders that are meant for the entire organization. But storing things in one place, in one central location, will make your life so much easier. Because I know so many times there are examples that I can give of people who need something and it's stored in an email file folder. So you have to search the email to find that attachment. You open it up, but that's not the latest attachment. Earlier in the call, we mentioned having a naming convention, which is how things are named and how they're matched. And so making sure that you have either whether or not this is a final draft, whether or not it's a work in progress or a dated file, that's helpful too, to be able to know what the latest policy and procedure and document that you're looking at. Because remember, as an HR professional, it is your job and responsibility to make sure that all of those procedures, those manuals, those handbooks are accessible by the employee if they need to be, and also are the latest and most updated versions. So any place where you can store things centrally is very helpful. And then there's 9 different documents that we think that you should really focus on first. We actually have an entire checklist of to-do list items or document items that you'll need as an HR professional. And so we'll send that out to you, as well as the entire checklist of all documents in all areas of HR that you need. But the biggest ones that we see happening, that we see being asked about again and again and again, the employee handbook, a work from home policy or a flexible work policy, a benefits handbook and guide, and then we have the company mission, the company vision, and then the core values statement as well. The acceptable use policy, any contract templates, offer letter templates that you have, and then a new hire guide or a new starter guide. So this seems like a lot of documents, and maybe you don't have all of these on hand just yet, but that's okay. I think that there's a lot of opportunities to be able to grow. This is the first 9 that we are asked about regularly that we see as most common. Maybe you have a handbook on file already, but you don't necessarily have specific policies, but you have a sort of procedure or process. And so that's where I kind of want to talk about the differences between a policy and procedure. Remember, you can have a policy document and a procedure guide that is written out, and they don't have to be the same thing. So think of a procedure as a process or steps that you take when something happens or when a situation arises or how you handle a certain project. That would be a procedure, a process document. A policy document is a little bit more concrete. That is something where if it's in a policy, it's stated, it should be marked as consistent, it should be in line with your organization's company values and core mission and vision as well. So you don't necessarily have to have every single thing in a formalized policy. It can be in a process document and a procedure document. So I would encourage you not to put a lot of pressure on yourself to make everything into a formalized policy. You can still have procedures that you follow that are consistent and in line with your company's mission and vision, but they're not necessarily a written hard and fast policy as well. And we have a checklist for these items. We'll send that out to you so that you can go over some of those items. And there's actually a lot of templates that we already have on our website as well. So we'll link to some of the templates that we have for some of those things like work from home policy and flexible work policy as well. So hopefully that gets you started and helps you feel just a little bit more prepared on some of the documentation that you should have on file and how you store that.
There's quite a lot of takeaways from this webinar, isn't there? We're going to have to send maybe more than one email to the participants today, I think, because there's quite a lot of content we're sending out.
Maybe you'll have to flag that email and save it in a folder that you've prepared and outlined.
Absolutely.
And then put all the documents to a shared company library.
That sounds like a great idea. It does. Okay, so a huge part of today's HR world is learning and development. And the top tip here is quite simply create a learning culture. Do everything you can to make people want to learn, but also to facilitate their learning. So how do we do this? Okay, so the first key is that feedback is key. Regular reviews with your people so that you can teach staff where they need to improve, because they might not realize where they need to improve. But also don't forget that feedback is a two-way street. The people doing the reviews, the managers, the leaders, really need to be listening, need to be acting on what people have told them within these sessions. Secondly, make sure that people have an opportunity to learn, and that doesn't need to be overly complicated. It could be anything from designating a specific time on a specific day of the week that people are encouraged to read a book, to watch a webinar, to work towards a qualification. I know that I've worked in an organisation previously where every Wednesday morning we were encouraged to watch a TED Talk, for example. It could even be more of a collaborative session where you invite participants from across the business. When Sarah and I first discussed this section of the webinar, Sarah mentioned Lunch and Learns as a great idea. I've worked for a business also in the past that held what they called What We're Doing workshops, and that again was on a Wednesday morning, the first Wednesday of each month, and it would start at 8 a.m. before the working day. And there was somebody from a specific department nominated to present to the rest of the business about what they did to knowledge share with others. Then we would recommend you simply designate an HR point person to focus on the importance of L&D. Create things such as a training request form. If that has to be in a paper version, then it can be in a paper version. If you have a system such as HR Partner, it could be within HR Partner's custom forms module, or even Google Forms. We all have access to all of these different facilities today, all of these different tech stacks, as Sarah said, but also the paper form is better than no form at all. This will allow people to know that it's there, that they're being listened to, that they are being invested in. But most importantly for me here is lead by example. Schedule time for your own learning and let people see that you're doing it as well. Okay.
Wonderful. this next part, when we talk about people and benefits management, really carries forward with the learning culture as well. So they really go hand in hand. And when we talk a little bit about the people management side, to start with people management, we want to talk with you a little bit about one-to-ones. If you don't do these within your organization, it may be a simple way to start amongst your team to create a learning culture, but to create an idea or an opportunity for your employees and your staff to have a little bit more feedback. So a one-to-one meeting is just the manager and the employee sitting down in an informal setting to talk about the week, the work week, the month, the projects that they're doing, how they're feeling. Originally, in the experience that I have with a one-to-one, it's meant to be a little bit more informal. It's meant to be more of a check-in. And so it doesn't have to be a formal, very standard and very, it can be a little bit more informal of a process. So create a calendar event and put that on your calendar. Maybe it's every other week. Maybe it's once per month. Maybe it's only 30 minutes every week where you're checking in with your staff, and it's one person to one person, and they're talking in a casual setting, and it's very open. I would also encourage you to create a document for that one-on-one that gets completed and updated on every meeting. So you check in each and every time, and you have that updated to the document. So we've met today on Monday, and we've talked about this. Next Monday, we've talked about this. And so that becomes a running log of some of those highlights. And that's not necessarily meant to track your employees' status or the work that they're doing, or to keep tabs on them. But I think that creates an open conversation and sets expectations with your staff in a very casual way. They don't all have to have this type of structure. You can have a little bit of flexibility with how you build your one-to-ones, but I'd encourage that you start them with at least your own immediate team and create that standard. So instead of doing the one-to-one weekly, maybe it's a better fit to start with a monthly Q&A with your whole team. So anybody from the team sits down over the lunch hour or first thing in the morning, and they can meet, they ask questions, they can talk amongst each other. It really creates a culture of support, and it encourages that open communication, which really helps everybody else to work a little bit more efficiently as well and effectively, because everybody knows what their task items are, and that everybody feels not only supported, but that they have that ownership for those specific tasks. And then, of course, we can have things like employee coaching meetings as well. These may be a little bit more formalized. These may be meetings where you're talking with your employee about how to do something, how to handle a situation, handle a task in a way that's different than they have had before. So it may not necessarily be a write-up, it may not be a negative meeting, but just an opportunity for that employee to learn a little bit more from you and from your example, from your professionalism, from your experience. Remember, your junior level employees, your staff often want to know what they're expected to do. And if you have those coaching meetings that set those expectations and to teach them to continually create that learning culture, that helps everybody. Because they are already meeting with you regularly. So they feel that open line of communication, and it feels like it can be approached. That creates a little bit more of an engagement, a little bit more of a buy-in as a staff member as well. We also have the benefits side. So this is going to be a simple bullet point. So I would encourage you to start a benefits guide. This is something that you can have anybody on the team create. It does not have to be you. You can even talk about how maybe next year or in the months to come, you have an intern or a junior level staff create something like a guide that is available to all staff of all the benefits that are available to them. So what are the benefits the organization provides, what's available, and how to access those benefits. So I've seen companies do different varieties of this. It could be just a one sheet, it could be a booklet, it could be something where they have, in the HR partner company library, you can open up a document and you can link it to your URLs. You can have a benefits folder with helpful information pieces. So a great project for a new staff, for an intern, for a junior level employee to take on basically you're evaluating all of the benefits of the organization that are available to your staff and then outlining them in some sort of document that can be stored and shared. And when we talk about creating a culture of learning and a culture of engagement at your organization to make it just a happier place to work, having things that are accessible and information that's easy to find is one of those things that you don't often think about. But if your employee isn't having to think about how they don't know about benefits, it's not even on their radar. And instead, they just are aware of everything that's available to them as a staff. So they don't even have to think about, oh, I wonder if we have this, or I don't know how to access this, or I have a benefits card and I can't make it work, and I don't know who our vendor is for this. If you have that outlined already, they're not having to do any of the extra work. And most of the time, those things are a little bit more static, meaning they don't change from year to year or month to month. So that it isn't a guide or a PDF document that needs updating constantly.
Great. I was just thinking about an employer that I've worked for in the past that did a big launch of their new employer brand. And as part of that, they released a benefits guide in paper form. I keep coming back to paper form. That basically it was a cardboard cube that when you opened it out had a branded gift inside of it, but it had all of the different benefits of working for that business on there. So everybody got something to take away, but it felt exciting and everybody was reading it and everyone was discussing it. It's a great talking point in the office and a great way to launch that benefits package. Absolutely. And their core values and employer brand.
Of course. Another great place to add your company mission and your values and your vision onto that guide, to make it accessible, to make it known, to post it everywhere, to create that culture. And I think that you're talking about engagement next, so it's a perfect segue.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say this actually, because you mentioned there all about one-to-ones and things. And for me, one-to-ones are a huge driver of employee engagement. It should never be undervalued, employee engagement. An engaged employee is a happy employee, and a happy employee is a loyal and productive employee. Again, we've dedicated a full webinar to this, and we will send you the link to that one as well after this webinar. But here are a few quick wins. And I think first and foremost, engagement comes from open communication channels. So being honest with your people and enable them to be honest with you. Give them opportunities to talk to you. So one-to-ones again are a great thing. News articles. So again, if you have a system where you can publish news articles such as HR Partner, do it, broadcast things, keep them in the loop of things that are happening within the business. If you don't have that, we all have access to emails today, so we can broadcast updates to our team members via email as well. When you're facilitating that communication, that open communication, find out what your employees want, encourage them to speak up about what they want, what their expectations are. Don't make presumptions. Once you've got some great ideas, why not go ahead and create an employee engagement calendar? Schedule some engagement related tasks, projects or fun events, maybe just one per month to start with until you get into the swing of it and you understand what's working, what maybe not so much. There's nothing wrong with a bit of trial and error, see what works. You can reuse the successful ones year on year so your employees know what to expect and it starts to feel exciting and they look forward to these things. You're creating a culture of engagement. An annual team building day potentially, or a charity event even, or maybe even community work that you get everybody doing together. I once worked for a company, I keep saying that, but I do like to talk about my own experiences because it's where we all learn, isn't it? But one of my previous employers basically had an annual family fun day, and it wasn't really a huge event, but it was somewhere where you could bring your children into the office and your partners and things. And it just, I mean, if you can get your employees' families raving about your company, you're onto a winner, aren't you? Get everybody enthusiastic about it. Celebrate things from new client wins to record months, but don't overlook the birthdays and work anniversaries. These are the things that make people feel recognised and valued and like they're a true part of something. Okay. Well, there we go, Sarah. Over to you again.
So we talked about a lot in today's and a couple of things to close out, but the first things We referenced so many webinars, discussions, templates, articles, and freebie documents. And so if you're registered for the webinar today, and if you're participating today, we will put all of that in one email with links. It will be a bulleted list. It'll be very easy to be able to bookmark in your email, to save those documents so that you can use some of those resources that we have already created or we have created for you. And you can make them useful and impactful in your organization today. So we will send you all of those freebies. We talked about an HR policy checklist, a job description checklist, interviewing guides. So all of those things and much more will be in that email so that you can have it. That's part of the reason why we wanted to do it towards the end of the year when you're thinking about planning for the new calendar year. It's good to be able to get some of those things sorted to be able to plan for the next few weeks and months ahead that you have. Any related the content that we referenced in today's discussion will be in your email. So keep an eye on that. And we're excited to share that with you because we think that it has some really, really helpful hacks to make you just a little bit more productive as an HR professional.
Absolutely. So should we move on to some questions?
Yeah, of course. Of course.
We've just had a great question come in. Do you have any tips for employee engagement when all staff are remote? Well, we're a fully remote team, aren't we, Sarah? So simple little things like we utilize Slack in our organization, and that just means that we're in different time zones, not just completely remote, but in completely different time zones, a lot of us. So just ensuring that, again, you've got that open communication channel. Sarah and I ourselves are in touch every day via Slack, along with our other teammates, aren't we? But we also make sure we have regular team meetings, one-on-ones, as well as with the bigger, the wider team. We also would very much encourage things like you can still do team building exercises remotely. So I know of companies that have done things like escape rooms online, all of these kinds of things, or they've all gotten together online and done kind of cooking clubs and things, and all cooked a meal together, or all just sat down and ate the tea together, just really simple things like that. It's all about building that team spirit, I think, when everybody's working remotely. Have you got any tips there, Sarah?
I think you do not underutilize or undervalue the power of communication here. So when everybody is remote and everybody is working in their own space at their own pace, in their own environment, anything that you can do to help with engagement by communicating to your staff all at once. They know where the communication happens. They know where they're going to receive that. Maybe it's at the email or at the top of their email. I have a client that I work with who they add calendar invites or calendar events to a shared company calendar, and it's for the entire day. And inside that calendar event is details, dates, updates, information. So they have it at the top of the day, and it's sort of that entire piece of information all inside the calendar event. So you don't necessarily have to send that invite out because it's already on a shared calendar, and the staff are known, they're conditioned to go to that shared company calendar to look for updates, to look for communication pushes. And this is for a client who works a lot within Outlook. So they have just a separate Outlook calendar that they create for engagement. They have a separate calendar for things like, and in that engagement calendar, things like social events, updates, time off, upcoming holidays, things like that. But then there's also pieces of information. So if they have new starters coming in that calendar event, you have information about the new starter. So anybody who is working remote can feel like they're a part of it, even though they're separate and maybe physically not there. And that's because they're being communicated to in a way where they know where to look for the communication, and it's all at once. So don't underutilize or undervalue the power of communication to the team via Slack, via email, via a calendar invite, however you choose to communicate with all of your staff. I think that's so helpful for when we're all working remote.
There's little things as well, like with an HR partner, we have the biography section, which I think is quite underutilized and undervalued by some people, but we use it internally, and we've found it really insightful, I think, Sarah, when we all wrote our own little biographies about ourselves, haven't we? Because it just allows you to find out more about your employees, about your colleagues, and I think it's really good to have people do those before they start with you as part of their onboarding, so that as soon as they start, people are getting curious and finding out a bit more about them, and likewise they, as a new starter, can go into other people's biographies and read out a little bit about them and find out who they're going to be working with. It's a nice icebreaker sometimes, I think.
Absolutely. And anything that you can do to help your employees get to know each other, to build that communication, that rapport and trust so that they're working well together. Because when you have all of those things, it starts to sync up. And so your remote staff really tends to work very well.
Yeah, because you don't have those water cooler moments that you'd have in an office, do you? So you've got to make up for those in some way. I think it counts for a lot in terms of your employee satisfaction. Absolutely.
Yes, of course, of course. And one of the questions that we got privately was how do you receive the freebie documents? So they're either going to be a link to a URL, a PDF document, and then in that email will also be the recorded session of the meeting. So if you're registered today, if you're participating today, once we put that email together and send that out at the end of the week, you will get all of those documents. So it's not how you'll receive it. It won't be 10 separate emails. It will be one email. It will be big. And so keep an eye on that. And if you don't get that within the next 2 weeks, give us a few weeks to put it together. But if you don't get that for the next 2 weeks, reach out to support@hrpartner.io, and we'd be happy to make sure that you have a copy of that. But if you're registered today, you will definitely get the recording, and you will definitely receive all of those things in that document style email.
Lovely.
I think that's all of the questions that we have, but it was wonderful.
We've answered a few of them, haven't we, in the chat? Okay, lovely. Well, if there are no more questions, then thank you all very much for participating. As Sarah said, give us 2 weeks to send out all of the documentation to you, but thank you very much for taking part today. It's been a real pleasure, and I hope you've taken something away from it.